Thank you for joining us again for reading the Bible together. We're very happy to have you. Before we begin, I want to remind you once more we're looking to have a question and answer session somewhere along the line, so if you could send us your questions, the email address is going to be on your screen there so that you can do that, so send those in for us. This week we're looking at Psalm 22, and this is, if you don't know what that is, you'll right away be familiar with it when we read the first line. But let's just start out with the idea, the concept that we're talking about to begin with is, if we always do what we're supposed to do, will God make sure that only good things happen to us? That's an interesting question. A lot of people believe that that's true. But there are things in the Bible that there are things in the Bible that might make it seem that way, but it's not that simple. Sometimes bad things happen to us even though we haven't done anything to deserve them. As Jesus was dying on the cross, he quoted the first line of this psalm, Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? We know that Jesus never did any bad things. So what's going on here?
So the first thing that we need to talk about is that this is a psalm of lament. And we haven't really we've talked about a lot of psalms, but we haven't talked about the idea of psalms of lament. And there are psalms of praise that are talking about how great God is, and then there are psalms that are just bemoaning a difficult situation. In this case, the psalmist is upset because it seems like God just isn't paying attention. And there are multiple psalms that have this idea of, wake up, God, where are you? How long, O Lord? There's several of them that you can see throughout the book of Psalms, more in some sections than others, but all over the book of Psalms there are these psalms of lament. And the implication is always something along the lines of, God, are you living up to your promises? This doesn't seem to be going the way that it should. So with that in mind, with that lens in mind, let's look at Psalm 22. And also, we should also always pay attention if there's a heading in the Psalms. The headings in the Psalms aren't like headings in other parts of the Bible. A lot of them are there because they were with the original as we know of manuscripts, that they are part of the psalm. When the psalmists assemble them, they put these little taglines on them. So this one is, for the director of music and to the tune of Doe of the Morning, a psalm of David. Two good reminders there in that heading that, first of all, psalms, we read them and we analyze them and we talk about this verse and all this kind of stuff, but originally they were songs. They are emotions. They are poetry. They are meant to be studied and repeated. One time reading through a psalm isn't going to really get you to the depths of that psalm. And also a psalm of David, somebody whose real experiences we have started to understand and be familiar with if we've looked through 1st and 2nd Samuel. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One, and you are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted in you, and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. We can really feel the psalmist's discouragement, disappointment. We can feel that sometimes we feel like God has forgotten us, like he doesn't see what we are going through. And so this honest expression of despair and disappointment is directed through these Psalms, is directed at God himself. And honesty is important in our relationship with God. There is no fear that God will be upset or even shocked by our despair. He does know what we're thinking. We realize that. So if we think that through, that shouldn't be really a surprise to us. He knows what we're feeling before we even express it.
So the logical conclusion to that is if you are communing with God, trying to pray even in these difficult circumstances, say what you're feeling. The important thing is one of the important things in this particular psalm especially is where the question is directed. The psalmist is not asking the existential question, why has God forsaken me? He's addressing himself to God himself. God, why have you forsaken me? Now, just be assured that God can handle our expressions of despair and discouragement and even anger. Don't turn to someone else for the answer. God is the only one who can adequately respond to these questions. And he may not give us all the answers we always want, that we'd like to have. He may not give us the answers as quickly as we'd like to have them. But it's important that we keep looking to him for the answers to our questions. He goes on to say, and this is interesting because these next few verses seem to be pretty directly connected in many ways to some of the details of Jesus' crucifixion. And bear in mind, this is a 1,000 years before that, so you can take that where you think it should go. The psalmist continues to say, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, it has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment.
So it's very serious. We can really see the parallels with what happened at the crucifixion, but then we have an important turning point with a promise of deliverance, and we realize that what seems like God forsaking us it's not really that, because it doesn't last forever. And Jesus knew this psalm in its entirety. He knew the whole psalm. He says this first line because of the desperate situation that he's in, but he knows the whole psalm. And as a close-up, in the moment, things seem very hopeless, but we know there's deliverance in the long term. I mean, we talked about that last week, taking that long view. So let's read a few more verses, 19 and 20, and then we're going to skip ahead. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive, posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it.
Okay, and as we have mentioned, Jesus quotes the first line of this psalm as he's dying on the cross. But in a sense, the whole psalm is there in his mind and in the minds of his followers. Hopefully they would recognize this too. Here's a quote from Matthew chapter 27, verse 45. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's the moment that Jesus carries the weight of the sins of the world in order to rescue us. And what looks like the greatest injustice in history, when God allows the consequences of sin to fall on his Son, becomes the way to the great miracle of redemption. Jesus is human as well, and so in his humanness, he reacts with this with this lament, "My God, why have you forsaken me?"
And he knew where the psalm was going, because as we said before, he knew the whole psalm. So let's remind ourselves of verses 27 and 31. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it. So this helps us understand what Jesus, this psalm helps us understand what Jesus faced on the cross, and it helps us to know how to respond when we feel that a pack of villains has encircled us, and to not assume that God is just displeased, and that's why we're suffering, or that God doesn't hear our complaints or is displeased when we complain. God is not surprised, and this is in the Bible. This, why have you forsaken me? This honest question.
And so it's important for us to continue to focus on God even when we don't feel like it or understand what he's doing. We hold on because we know that eventually we'll see God is there even when it seems he's abandoned us. And note the laments throughout the Psalms. They help us to prepare for hard times, and they help us to face hard times when they come. So when you're going through the Psalms and you come across some of these things where it seems like the person is angry at God or upset at God or despairing or not understanding, that's exactly what's going on, but that's what God understands, and that's what God is dealing with in our lives and in our future. So we need to have that confidence in him. Thanks again for joining us this week, and we'll remind you that, again, to send in your questions. We're looking for questions for our question and answer episode sometime in the future. And we want to remind you that the sermon this coming Sunday is on generosity. We hope you can join us. And please, if you can't come in person, which it would be great if you could, but if you can't come in person, join us on Facebook or YouTube and worship with us in that way. The Sermon on Generosity by Pastor Gary. Thank you.